Welcome back to the Bipolar Cat. I'm your host, Amanda Lee, ready to tell you the most there is about bipolar disorder and mental illness. Thank you all for tuning in today, you guys. I decided to do a kind of on the whim type of episode. I don't really know what I'm going to be talking about today, but I figured I'd come on here and just see how y'all are doing today and just check in on you guys. And as for me, I have been doing pretty good. I am staying busy and active. Active as in physically doing my exercises, trying my best to do some weightlifting and some cardio, and just try to stay up to date with my physicality as far as my moods go, because I know when I do physical activity, my moods are a little bit more stabilized. So, yeah, and other projects I've been working on, I'm super excited. I'm getting some momentum on the pod. People are noticing the pod, and I'm super excited to share this pod with everyone because I feel like our community, and by our community, I mean the spectrum of mental illness, doesn't really have a platform. Yes, there are books, there are website, website links and stuff of that matter, but is there really a platform for us to talk about, well, mental illness? A lot of people do not want to talk about it. A lot of people hate to talk about it. And a lot of people just choose to ignore it. But it is there. It is a strange subject to address in society today. I don't find it strange because it is who I am, that I am bipolar and I admit it, and I am proud and I am strong and I am thriving as an individual with the right medications and the right treatment plans from my doctors. I am able to do this podcast and just talk to you a little bit about, some things that are on my mind. And one of the things that I feel needs to be addressed is grief. Excuse me here. I'm on the computer as I speak here. Yes, grief. It is a very touchy subject. I've never really experienced grief until I lost my mother. And I have lost certain people in my life before, family members and friends and but that did hit me hard, but not as hard as when my mother passed away. And I did reach like a psychotic break. I was just constantly crying and crying and crying every day. Can you imagine? I was crying every day for about 8 months straight. There was not a day that I did not cry, maybe 1 or 2 days here and there, but most of the time I spent all those months crying. I loved my mother so much. She meant the world to me. And when I lost her, it was just so devastating to me. And it's a subject that I think needs to be addressed, is grief. How do you deal with grief, especially a natural response to it? Like, what can be your natural response with somebody with a mental illness? It's very hard and it's very trying for most people to begin the process of grief, to go through it and to heal from the grief. Is there such a thing as dysfunctional grief? I don't know. I mean, dysfunctional grief, I've heard of the term, but I think it's more of a very downward spiral of grieving where it's like you turn maybe to alcohol and drugs and maybe, you know, um, erratic sexual behavior, or just, that's the way to cope. And, I'm here to tell you that that is not the way to cope. The way to cope, I think, from what I've learned since my mother's passing, is to let the grief express itself. And I don't mean through drugs or alcohol or anything of that matter. I mean in the sense that whatever grief is inside you, you have to let it out. Yeah. As hard as it may be, grieving can become unhealthy, but at the same time, I think it is healthy. It's healthy to feel these painful emotions, to to know that it's going to be long lasting, especially if it's someone or something that you lost. And it could be a pet, it could be a family heirloom, it could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be a peer. I mean, anybody or anything that you feel you are grieving for. Go through those emotions, really feel them, and really conquer them as best you can without the use of drugs and alcohol. Because if you do use drugs and alcohol to get away from this grief and to deal with it, you're only sending your body and mind down to a path that is just dark and daunting and scary, and you do not want to go down that path. Now, can grief cause psychotic breakdowns? Yes, they can, especially in the bipolar community. Grief is just something that has to be dealt with in a healthy and complex way. And it's going to be messy. It's going to be complicated. It's going to be scary. It's going to be dark. You're going to go to some very dark places in your mind when you're grieving, because that's what I did. And I was so sick of grieving that I just decided, you know what? I need to stop this cycle and I need to do something better with my time. So, you know what I did, you guys? I started this podcast and I never thought it would take off. I mean, I have a couple of listeners in some other countries, which is pretty cool. But, I wanted to be the voice to this community because why not? We need advocates in the spectrum of mental illness. Nobody talks about it enough. People do know it's there. People probably have a family member or two or know a friend that is mentally ill. But I mean, is it talked about? Is it really talked about? That's what you got to ask for yourselves. And, you know, this is a coping mechanism for me, is this podcast, and I'm really loving it. And I'm finally on here. It took a couple of episodes, but I'm on here to talk about the grief, which is the grief I felt during my mother's passing. Now, when my mother passed away, I was numb. I was numb to the point that I did not know where I was, who I was, how much time had passed. I looked back a year later. It's been about a year and a half, almost 2 years in August. I'm sorry, in July. And I look back and it's like, what? A year has gone by? What have I been doing this whole year, this whole past year? And what I was doing was grieving. Yeah, I was grieving. I was sad. I was saddened. I was in shambles. You know, I did have my family. I had my brother and sister to be there for me, and I'm so happy they were. And we've gotten closer since then. But it was a very devastating moment in my life. And, we are going to go through some very hard times. And we have to learn to cope in any best way we know how and deal with the mental illness that we're suffering from. It's a process. It could be overwhelming, but we got to cope. And I think grief, depending on the type of person you are, can be very painful and long lasting. I mean, to the point where it's so severe that you probably might even have trouble recovering from the loss and resuming back to your own life again. That's the way it was for me. I suffered a loss and it was just depressing. I was in a lowest point in my life, but I'm lucky that I had friends and family that supported me. A lot of people don't have that. They don't have friends and family to support them. They're alone. And my heart goes out to them. Or for anybody who's listening in right now, if you feel you're alone, just know that There are people dealing with the same things, and grief is just something that's so hard, but it can be so healthy in a way that you can try your best to cope and create coping mechanisms for yourself to get through it and to grieve as best you can and to get back to your life. Don't give up. Don't lose hope. Get back to living. That's it for today, my friends. Remember to just breathe, relax, know that you are in a safe space and that you are not alone. I am right there with you. That's all for today, my friends. Till next time. Bye.